Well, howdy, y'all. This is Miss Trivet, and we're working in Chapter 8 today. So hopefully you're comfortable, maybe gotten some sweet tea ready so we can learn some math. Chapter 8, Lesson 1 today, our goal is to talk about three-dimensional figures. That's what the lesson title is. So the I can statement should say, or learning target, I can sketch and learn the vocabulary of prisms and pyramids. And so our math books are open to page 356. 356. Let's start with our learning target. I can sketch and learn the vocabulary of prisms and pyramids. All right, so at the top of page 356, it gives us some pictures and highlighted words we'll talk about first. It says a solid is a three-dimensional figure that encloses a shape. We'll pause there and write that down. So it talks about what a solid is. And that's a three-dimensional or a 3D. That's what 3D stands for, three-dimensional figure. So when I think of the word solid, I think of a box, like a shoebox or any kind of box or enclosed shape that actually sticks out of the paper. So it's three-dimensional rather than flat on a piece of paper. Then the second one on the book says a polyhedron is a solid whose faces are all polygons. Polyhedron is one that I'm not going to make us write down, but basically it sounds very complicated, polyhedron, but it's just the same thing as saying a 3D solid, pretty much. So what I'd like us to do is try to draw a 3D kind of shoebox. So if we do that, looking at the same kind of look that we're seeing on page 356, the way we draw a 3D box is we start here with some sort of rectangle or square. Try your best to make those straight. And then what we would do here is do the same size of square or rectangle kind of up to the right. So pretty close to the same size up here. So we've got the front and the back of our box. Now what we do to make it look 3D is we can take the top corner and the top corner and we can connect those two together. Then we can take this top corner and this top corner and connect those together. We can take the bottom right and the bottom right and connect those. And then if you want to connect these ones, you're kind of looking through the shape, so you might want to use a dotted line to connect those because we'd be looking through the shape at this 3D figure. So now that we have those, we want to talk about three vocabulary words on a 3D solid. The first one is called a face. So anytime you have one of these flat sides, that's called a face. So we're going to list that word over here. And then we can kind of color in one of the faces of this box. So the top of this box would be a face. The bottom of the box would be a face. So that would be a face. The front is a face, the back is a face, the right is a face, and the left is a face. So this particular box would have 6 faces. Then the next word we would use is edge. So let's write that one down here. So a 3D solid has edges as well, and the edges are basically like all the little sides. So an edge is like this little side here. So you have a side, a side, a side, a side. Those are all edges. So there's 4 edges here. This would be an edge, another edge, another edge, another edge. And then all of these back here would also be edges. So if I were to count up how many edges this shape has, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 edges. And then finally, we want to talk about what is a vertex on a shape. And if there's one vertex, we call it a vertex. But if there's more than one vertex, we call them vertices. So that's the plural version of that. A vertex is basically one of the corners of the shape. So where multiple lines meet, that's a vertex. So if we were to make dots on all of these corners where lines are meeting, those would be all the vertices. So we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 vertices on this shape. So that's kind of our vocabulary to start off with. We're going to get to a little bit more vocabulary in a little while here, but let's try example 1 before we do that. So we'll skip to a different color here. Example 1 is just talking about this vocabulary that we just discussed. So example 1 is finding the number of faces, edges, and vertices. So it says find the number of faces, edges, and vertices of the solid. And you have a pink solid there. And we're going to try to draw that actually in our notes. And so I'll help you because not everybody is artistically inclined to drawing 3D shapes. So if we want to draw this shape, looks to me like the front of the shape has a taller sort of rectangle face. Hopefully you're drawing your line straighter than I am. Then what we can do is from the top side, we can make that a little trapezoid by making 2 slanted lines out. And then you can connect those slanted lines. So we made like a top trapezoid there. And the way we can make the bottom trapezoid is we can slant these bottom lines the same slant as we did the top. And then in the background, since we're kind of looking through the shape, this one we might probably put a dotted line there because that's kind of looking through the shape. And then we could connect the sides here and the sides here. Mine's a little off. This side's a little smaller than this one, but you can get the idea. That is our 3D solid they're wanting us to use. So now they want us to know, okay, how many, so this is my number symbol. I want the number of faces. So let's figure out how many faces there are. So from our vocabulary up here, remember a face is one of the flat sides. So the top would be a face, the front would be a face, the bottom is a face, the right and left, and then you have the whole back being a face. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 faces on this solid. That would be faces. Then the next one they want us to know is the number of edges. Okay, well, our edges here in our vocabulary are these side lengths. So in the front, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 edges, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then 11 and 12. So 12 total edges here. And lastly, they want us to know how many vertices there are. So number of vertices. Remember, the vertices are the corners. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 corners. So we have a total of 8 vertices. Go ahead and pause the video and try number 1 on your own midway down the page on 356. Okay, if you tried that one, you're doing the same thing we did in our example. So we want faces, edges, and vertices. So for number 1, there are 5 faces, there are 9 edges, and there are 6 vertices. So now we'll actually get back to blue and we're going to work on a little bit more vocabulary, talking about some specific solids. The first one is called a prism. So we'll write that word down. Prism. We'll talk a little bit about what a prism is at the bottom of 356 in the key idea section. It says, a prism is a polyhedron that has 2 parallel identical bases. The lateral faces are parallelograms. So we want to jot down a couple of important things about that, and then we're going to try and draw one. So it's a prism that has 2 parallel identical bases. So we're going to list that. 2 parallel identical bases. And then keeping reading, it says the lateral faces are parallelograms. So we also want to add to that, lateral faces are parallelograms. And to make a little bit more sense of this definition, we're going to draw one together, the same one that we see in the book, and then I will kind of talk you through the definition as we look at the drawn prism. So the example we're making here is called a triangular prism. So we're going to write that down. And the reason why it's called a triangular prism is because the bases are triangles. So the first thing we're going to do to make a triangular prism is we're going to start with a triangle because the bases are triangles. There's one of my bases, and I'm going to go up diagonally to the right and do the same size triangle up here. Those are going to be my bases of my triangular prism. So those are two bases. Now we're going to draw the lateral faces. So we're going to take the top of this triangle and connect it to the top of this triangle. We're going to take the bottom right and connect to the bottom right over here. And I'm going to use a dotted line to connect these two sides because we're kind of looking through the shape here. So it says two parallel identical bases. So here's base number 1 and here's base number 2, and those are parallel. Then the lateral faces, which are the faces around the sides here, are parallelograms. So this shape, the bottom shape, and the left-hand side are all parallelograms. So let's color in the base here. So we know that this is a base. And then the side here would be called the lateral face. So lots of vocabulary in this lesson today. The next specific shape we're going to talk about is called a pyramid. So let's talk about what that is. In the book on the bottom of 356, it says a pyramid is a polyhedron that has one base. The lateral faces are triangles. So we have one base on a pyramid, and then the lateral faces are triangles. So the example we're going to create here is going to be a rectangular pyramid. And the reason it's called a rectangular pyramid is because the base, the one base that we draw, is going to end up being a rectangle. So to draw a rectangular pyramid, we're going to start out with a rectangle. And in this rectangle, we're going to make a 3D shape here. Whoops, I did not want to do that. Let's delete that. Oh boy. Let's go back here. Okay, there we go. We're going to make it look a little bit more like a parallelogram than a rectangle because we're trying to make this look 3D. So it kind of is going to look like a smushed over rectangle. So we're going to draw what looks like a parallelogram on the bottom. But if we were to look straight up and down on this, it would be a rectangle. Now what we do for a pyramid is we draw a dot that's not halfway between these 2 points, but a little bit over this side. So draw a dot. And then what we're going to do is connect this dot to each of the corners here. So we're going to connect it to this corner. We're going to connect it to the front corner. We're going to connect it to the other front corner. And then the one in the back, we'll probably want to use a dotted line because it's kind of like we're looking through the shape here. And there is a rectangular pyramid. If you look, this base right here, the bottom of our pyramid, okay, that's going to be our base, and that's a rectangle. So that is why it's called a rectangular pyramid. And the interesting thing about a pyramid is that all the sides, all the lateral faces come to a point at the top. So these little sides here are the lateral faces. So in a pyramid, all the sides come to a point together. And in a prism, there's two bases. So there's no one point that the sides are connecting to. So with that being said, we should be able to complete our assignment now, our lessons. So if we take a look at the top of page 357, we'll get to our next example. All right, example 2 here. It says drawing solids. So we're going to be drawing some solids here. The first one asks us to draw a rectangular prism. So we're just going to say draw a rectangular prism. Okay, well, going back to our vocabulary here, if we're drawing a prism, I'm going to look at these rules. 2 parallel identical bases, and the lateral faces are parallelograms. We drew a triangular prism because the bases are triangles. But if I'm doing a rectangular prism, the bases have to be rectangles. So instead of triangles for my bases, I'm going to use rectangles. So let's draw a rectangle, and you can decide what kind of rectangle you want. Mine's going to look like that. And then in the diagonally up to the right, you want to draw pretty much an identical rectangle here. Remember, the bases have to be identical. Now we just connect each of the points or the vertices. So the bottom right needs to be connected to the bottom right here. Top right to top right. Top left to top left. Woo. And then the bottom one down here, since we're kind of looking through our prism, might be dotted. And there we have a rectangular prism. And that was example 2, question A. Question B wants us to draw a triangular pyramid. So this one is a triangular pyramid. All right, well, going back to our notes, a pyramid, remember, has one base and the lateral faces are triangles. This one was a rectangular pyramid because the bottom was a rectangle. Our base this time, where the bottom is going to be a triangle since it's a triangular pyramid. So the first thing you're going to want to do is start with a triangle. Since the bottom is going to be a triangle. And then what we'll do is make a dot that all of our sides will connect to. We'll take that dot and connect it to the front left and the front right. And then when we connect it back here, since we're kind of looking through our shape, we'll make it a dotted line in the back. And this is a triangular pyramid because the base is a triangle and all of the sides come to a point at the top. We'll get to our last example, and then you have some on your owns to try. So example 3 says drawing views of a solid. It says draw the front, side, and top views of this eraser. So we want to draw front, side, and top views. And the eraser has an interesting shape. So what we're going to try and do is draw what this eraser looks like. So to me, we have kind of a slanted line going this way and another slanted line that's offset just a little bit like that. So it goes a little longer here and a little shorter here. These two are connected and these two are connected. And then this side kind of comes down here. And this side goes here and they kind of connect. That's a really rough sketch of this eraser. But we can go ahead and put eraser so that when we look back at our notes, we know what we were trying to do there. This last line, if we just take this and move it a little bit this way, it might look a little bit better. It's a little better. Mine still looks pretty awful. Okay, so if we're going to draw the front view, so if we're looking at the front, that's going to be this base right here. This is the front. So if I'm just drawing that shape, if you look in your book, it's a little easier to tell, but that's just going to be a parallelogram. So if I'm drawing the front view, if I'm only drawing that shape, if all I could see is the front, it would kind of look like this. front of the eraser there. Now, if I want the side view, that would be like this little guy right here. I'm going to label that side. And if I only looked at that side and I couldn't see the top or the other pieces or the bottom, you would see that it would just look like a little rectangle right here. And then the last one they want us to draw is the top view. So if all I was looking at was this piece right here, the top, we're going to label this top, and I couldn't see any other part of the eraser, it would just look like a big rectangle. So we have the front, the top, and the side views all drawn. Go ahead and pause and try on your own in 357. It's going to be kind of difficult to talk about the answers on those ones. So go ahead and just practice drawing a square prism, pentagonal pyramid, and then the front, side, and top views of the solids for numbers 4 and 5. And then that'll bring us to the end of our lesson.